Okay, so here we are with another editing session. Recently I went up to NASA in Huntsville to go see some of my friends up there. Whilst I was up there, I went to the museum, the Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, and took some photographs. Now these pictures were taken with my Canon EOS 70D. It's a 3-year-old camera, it's not the pro camera that I normally use, and it was also taken with a 10 to 18mm lens, so not my L glass lens. I done this as an experiment just to see the difference in photographs. Can you get good looking photographs from a 3-year-old camera and a not professional lens? Well, let's take a look. As you can see, we've already got everything loaded into Lightroom. Let's go into the develop module. Now it is a typical Alabama sunny day. Skies are going to be washed out. It's very bright blue. I had no filters on the camera. As I said, it's a cheaper lens. This lens is only $200 compared to an L glass lens, which is $2,000. Well, let's take a look at the pictures anyway. We can skip past these initial ones. Werner von Braun. First thing we need to do is get the angles right. Now, there's one difference immediately. Looking at the angles, everything. This angle here is straight. Now I'm standing right in front of this in the middle. This angle here, however, as you can see, is angling in. If I straighten the bottom, it now looks like this is angling in. This is still angling in a little bit. So there's one immediate difference between cameras and lenses. We do need to bring up the shadows on this. Quite a bit. Wow. Bring down the highlights. Just add a touch of vibrance. Probably don't need to dehaze this that much. Now this should have been, yes, this was shot at f7.1, so you can actually read the text and see the engineering medal. The main part was the engineering medal on this. Still can't see the actual plaque down here. Inducted July 29th, 1969. Now if we bring up the exposure, and the shadows, but now everything up here is blown out. Let's bring down the whites a bit. There we go. You can now read the plaque, you can now read the text. Everything works. I don't like that the top's cut off, and since I've straightened the bottom edge, the top edge doesn't look straight. So I'm not actually going to save that one. Now this was a spacesuit that was actually worn by Gene Cernan on the Apollo 17 mission. It has actually been on the moon. Bring up the exposure a bit. One thing when shooting photographs like this, when you're shooting into plexiglass boxes, that kind of thing, you see all the shadows? It makes you get lots of reflections on these. This is where a circular polarizer filter would have come in very handy. Bring down the highlights. That will help, the CPL will help get rid of these reflections. That looks okay. Let's save that one. Save, export, export. This was a clockwork planetarium type thing. There's the Earth, the Moon, the Sun, different planets and their moons floating round about. Exhibit Earth is a new exhibit that NASA had going on at the moment. Go over and check my vlog where you get a sneak preview of Neighborhood Earth. Now this is NASA's new spacesuits. This is just a prototype. Again, look at all the reflections in the plexiglass. A CPL filter is really required for this. Bringing out the person here in the reflection. So even with adjusting, yeah, that picture's just not going to work. But here's the plaque below it, and the difference between, this is currently what astronauts wear up on the ISS when they're going out for spacewalks. This is the proposed new one. Let's go to the garden. We should get better pictures in the garden. Saturn 1B rocket. Okay, we have multiple. Pictures of this. People in the bottom. Here's one without the people in the bottom and a slightly wider. Let's go for the slightly cropped in. Don't really need a lot of shadows. Dehaze this, should bring the sky back in a tad. There we go, that's looking good. We'll export that one. Now again with the lens, 10-18 wide angle lens. This rocket here is obviously not leaning like that. It would fall over. So this is something you've got to watch out for with ultra wide angle lenses, is your lines. Line here, this is one's actually slightly leaning in the other way, but that looks wrong. So here's 3 rockets lined up. We've got the wire. Again, it's leaning in. Look at the angle that this lens ends up giving you. Let's see if we can get one without the wire. I'm sure I did. Here we go. So let's take this one. Ultra wide, yeah, shot at 10mm. And this is the effect that it gives you. Everything is leaning. Even with lens profile, doesn't do that much. Very bright sunny day. Let's get the clarity on this up a bit. There we go. Wow, we need to because of how bright and sunny it is, these were shot at ISO 100. 4.5 is the minimum aperture of this 10-18 lens. But still, we're getting some half decent pictures out of it. That worked. Another angle of the Saturn 1B. This is the Atlas. No, this is the Mercury Redstone rocket. This isn't the one that actually shot Alan Shepard into space, but is the exact same type. The sun angle's making it hard to get pictures. Common problem you find in Alabama, unless of course you use filters. Filters down here in the south are almost a must. Very bright. Bring down the whites. Not too bad. This is the Atlas rocket. This is basically the rocket that shot John Glenn on his orbital missions. Three orbits of the Earth, first American to actually orbit the Earth. Again, it's 10 to 18 mil lens. And it's not that sharp. It's sharp enough, and even with the bright backgrounds, I'm having to adjust the exposure on this lens. It's a dark lens. Now previously I've been up to the Space and Rocket Centre and shot with my 1DX Mark II and proper L-glass, 70 to 200 and the 24-70 lenses. And everything's tack sharp. This just doesn't seem as sharp. When you zoom in, everything looks, yeah, see, that's not exactly sharp. It just seems a little off. But that's the difference between, as I said, a $200 lens and a $2,000 lens. That, however, has turned out okay. So with a little bit of post-editing, you can bring things back to look generally quite good. Look at the immense angle on this though. It looks like it's about to fall over. Lens correct? No. Even full-on distortion, which should straighten things out. If you look when I adjust the slider, it's widening it. It should help straighten things out. But the angle of the mercury, so we're not going to do that one. The angles are just way off. Saturn 1B. Okay, so this is a half decent one of the Saturn V. Angles are actually fairly straight here. Picture's a bit dark, as you can see through the histogram here. Shot at ISO 100. Very bright day. Right setting on the camera. We need to adjust the exposure a bit though. That over a full stop we needed to adjust. This one we can save. There we go, we're getting there we go. Maybe just a tad more on the shadows. To bring it out. So, tad much on the blue down here. Nice picture of a Saturn V. Same lens, zoomed all the way out to 18. The angles are a lot straighter. Now this was a two-part picture that I took to... Let's see if we can stitch these together as a panorama. Photo settings. photo merge panorama. Will it know to stitch them one atop? Yes, it did. Perspective view, so we're not cutting off the top. Let's see how good a job it does at actually creating the panorama. It's working. It's only 2 pictures to stitch together. There we go. It's done. So that will get pushed to the end of my list, so we'll get to that later. General picture of the park. This is a nose cone from one of the solid rocket boosters that are attached to the shuttle. Okay, so here we are inside the museum, and this is the second Saturn V that they've got at Huntsville. Portrait, landscape, which one's the better one? I do actually prefer this one, even although it's that one shows the rocket. Still got the rocket, but now you can see all this other. So do you want to just detail the Saturn V, or do you want essentially a very wide angle on everything? Let's go with the wide. Now the angle isn't quite right, but I don't know what to... There we go, that looks a bit straighter. Now, one of the problems with the museum, because of all these huge bay windows, you get lots and lots of shadow and lots of backlit objects. Which makes for a challenge. We're blowing out highlights here, and I can almost guarantee you, actually it's not bad. Not too bad. I can guarantee the blown out highlights are going to be the bay windows, which I'm not too bothered about at all. Get some colour in here. We can adjust the whites down a bit, which takes the blown highlights away. That works. This is a map on the floor detailing the landing spots for the various Apollo craft on the moon. Apollo 11, 16, 17, 15, 12 and 14, yep, in a separate picture. Shows you exactly where they landed. Do we take this? It's actually not that interesting a shot. So here's the back end of the Saturn V. At an angle, well, it's, here we go, we've got the actual engines. Okay, so if we straighten that one out, we actually start cutting off the belt there. So let's take the slightly wider shot and do the same thing. Done. Everything's now perfectly straight. Whites, these, I wish they had like shutters or something on the bay windows. Up the contrast, dehaze it a bit to try and now if you look what happened when we dehazed that, purple started creeping in at the edges of the pictures. I'm not bothered about the bay windows at all. This is the area that we're focusing on. 5 F1 engines on the Saturn V. And that works. Mock-up of the Project Gemini capsule, 2-man capsule. You can actually see the 2 astronauts sitting in there. Oh no, we want to fit. Not only is it backlit, it's also side lit. I don't know if I want to adjust the exposure. Let's take the lights down. There we go. We're now actually getting some detail through the side bay windows here. Whereas before that was completely blown out. Okay, so on to the next one. Time Life magazine cover of Werner von Braun with Werner's actual suitcase or briefcase that he used to travel with all the time. You'll see this in various footage that NASA's released over the years. Yeah. This is a scale model of the Saturn V, which you can see part of above. It's used for learning purposes to show you various parts of the craft and how it works. A slightly wider angle of the same thing. Is it worth keeping? Probably not. Yeah, this is Saturn 1B. And as you can see, it's extremely backlit due to these big bay windows. You can see through the windows clearly, but what I was actually taking a picture of is just very backlit. Let's go back to this. Let's see if we can actually bring out the shadows. 100% shadows. But in doing so, look at the grain we've introduced into the picture in order to bring this out. Standard view, it doesn't look too bad, but as soon as you zoom in, look at all that grain. It's because we've had to adjust the shadows so much. So I'm not going to keep that one. Next one, this is a H2 engine. H1 engine. It's on the back of this second stage of the Saturn, which is actually this stage here. Another one of Saturn V. We've already got a couple of the Saturn V, so don't actually need any more of that. This is the F1 engine. Mr. Big F1, yes, I was right. This engine is absolutely huge. Again, we're backlit because of the windows, but let's see what we can do. There we go. Bring up the shadows. We need to bring down the highlights because this is just blowing everything out. You can see by the histogram here. Bring in the clarity a bit. Probably need to tone down the whites. Get the Saturn V here. It's fairly much blown out. But since we're not worried about that, we want the engine. There we go. We've managed to recover enough. Too much. It's darkened it. Maybe lift just a tad. There we go. So we've got the F1 engine. We can save that one. This is the underneath of the Saturn V. Shadows bring up, and as you can see, taken from maybe about halfway along. This looks like the J2 engine. It is, it's J2. So this is the engine that the Saturn used. It's also the engine that the Space Shuttle used. And going forward, I think I got a picture of the new one. But there's another development to this. It's the J2X engine. Basically the same engine from the 1960s that the new SLS Space Launch System will be using. So we're getting a brand new rocket, the SLS, that is using essentially an engine from the 1960s that hasn't actually changed that much. Does that mean technology hasn't moved forward all that much? Or that the engineers back in Apollo days just got it absolutely correct? There are some changes to it. There is more thrust on the new J2X engine. It's got a better lift capacity, but essentially it is the exact same engine, the J2, NASA's J2 engine. That works, let's export that. Just a slightly tighter shot of the J2. Test stand, there's too much reflection. This, now, if we can bring up the shadows a bit, and probably the exposure, this is actually the new J2 engine. This is the J2X. Behind it you actually see the Space Launch System. It's a 1/10th scale model of the Space Launch System. The SLS will stand in its full configuration taller than the Saturn V. Saturn V was 363 feet. The SLS I think is coming in at just a tad under 370 feet. Just a smidge taller. Anyway, this is the new engine that's going on the first stage. Look at bringing the highlights down, look how clear things became. All because of these huge bay windows. That works, so there's the new J2X engine. Back outside, Saturn 1B again. Slightly tighter crop of the 1B. That's actually not a bad picture. This is taken with the 24-70, so this was actually taken with a different camera and the L lens. And you can see that it doesn't lean. This is the difference between an L lens and the 10-80 $200 lens. Or at least one of the differences. Bring up the vibrance and saturation a little touch. There we go, make it pop, but not too much. Dehaze the sky. And we can actually afford to just brighten it a tad. 0.24. There we go, that works. Mock-up of the moon lander. Yeah, it's more of a snapshot, not too bothered about that. And here's the second stage with the J2 engines. These aren't the F1 engines, these are the J2s. In fact, if I look here, this one's slightly better. Bring Up the shadows, down the highlights, down the whites, so that everything's not blown out. Clarity to get sharper, get a little bit of vibrance in the colours. There we go. This is the instrumentation ring on the Saturn V. Yeah. Another one of the Saturn V. Again, this is the 24-70 lens. You can see how straight the rocket is compared to the 10-18 lens. And we move on to the shuttle. This, of course, is the exterior tank of the shuttle. So we've got a wider angle showing it, or we've got a cropped in. Let's go with the wider angle. I think it's just slightly off, so let's straighten it out a bit. There we go. Bring up the contrast, clarity. Get a little bit of colour in. Bring the sky in. That's working. There we go, that worked. Export that. We got a mixed jumble of pictures of outside and inside. Not sure why it loaded it like this. This is a 1/10 scale model of the Saturn V. There's the instrumentation ring on the actual Saturn V rocket. This is the walkway that astronauts used to use when going across to board the Saturn V. This is the actual one from the Cape, not a replica. Different angle on the Saturn V. Here completely backlit. I was trying to get it so it wasn't as backlit. Didn't quite work. Tight crop of the shuttle. Here we go, the full shuttle. Now, as I said, I've been up to the Space and Rocket Center a number of times before and have many pictures that I've taken previously with better camera and better lens than the combination I was using for the most part on this shoot. Bring up the shadows, get the underside of here. Do we need to bring down the whites a touch? Just a smidge, that looks okay. So there's not that many pictures that I actually took this time. T-38 Talon jet. This is the underside of it. This is what NASA used to move its astronauts around the country when they go to visit various plants or go from, for example, Huntsville down to the Cape or down to Houston. picture of the rock dedicated to the astronauts of the Challenger. Back end of the shuttle. Didn't cut off the tail, but there's only like 1 or 2 pixels. If I try and straighten this, I'm going to cut off the tail. Let's give it a try though. When straightening a picture, look for a line like that. And then just use the straightening tool, run it across the line, and there you go, picture straightened out. Bring up the shadows, you can now see the engines. These are the solid rocket boosters. 3 J2s on the back of the shuttle. Bring up the clarity, bring down the highlights to try and get something in the sky. And the whites, and then we bring in the sky. By dehazing it. There we go, that one works. Export. Tighter one of the J2s on the back of the shuttle. Here is an actual another J2 engine. This is the... It's a mock-up of the control panel inside a Saturn V. Different angle on the shuttle. And there's a bunch of others with the Saturn V's, etc. Let's jump straight to the end and see what our panoramic stitch actually done. So if you remember earlier, we stitched together 2 photographs and made a panorama. Well, here's the results of that stitch, and it actually worked not too bad. You can't really tell where the seam is. It's a little bit on the dark side. Oh, this was taken with the other lens, that's why. Bring in the sky a tad. There we go. Can actually increase. A full stop's worth of light. But it ends up not too bad. So let's save it. And there you have it. Another quick editing session done with. This one from NASA in Huntsville. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something from it, whether it's editing pictures or just a little bit about some of the craft, etc. that they have up in NASA Huntsville. Go take a visit if you get some time. It's well worth the trip. And we'll see you in our next video. As always, the pictures for this video will be posted over on my Facebook site, Hackersoft Productions LLC. Please go like that page. Take a look at the images. These are the images that we edited in this session. And if you like this video, please subscribe.